All right, we got folks trickling in. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in a minute. Let everybody join first. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope it's been a good one so far. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Oh, we got a thumbs up. Excellent. All right, we'll give it just one more minute. There's some folks that are still joining.
Well,
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today. My name is Alex Kron and I am BPOC's Digital Operations and Collections Information Analyst. And here with me today is Devon Matson, BPOC's Research and Project Specialist, as my co-host. For those who are just joining us for the first time, BPOC is a nonprofit digital strategy and strategic planning consultancy based in San Diego, California. We've been hosting free technology webinars since late 2020 to facilitate discussions around the technologies that we use in museums, libraries, archives, and galleries. You can learn more about the webinar series and catch recordings from past webinars on our YouTube channel. And you can learn more about BPOC on our website. Before we do get started, I want to mention that we have Zoom captioning at the bottom and the Otter AI transcription service in the upper left-hand corner if you need transcription assistance. Please put any questions that you have in the Q&A section. We will have time for Q&A after the presentation. Please also feel free to contribute to the conversation in the chat as well. Last, we are conducting a survey on current AI usage in the cultural heritage field. I am going to put a link into the chat. Oops, wrong link. Apologies for that, everybody. I put that link in the chat, and I will share the survey link again when we promote the webinar series. The survey results and what is discussed during the webinars as part of our Dreaming of AI series will be anonymized and summarized in a report that we're going to publish on BPOC's website and social media channels. Now, today we have Dr. Birgitte Aga, MUNCH's Head of Innovation and Research, and Dr. Irina Sandu, MUNCH's Conservation Scientist. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them for their presentations.
Hi there. First of all, thank you, Alex, for having us. And thank you all of those who joined today. We really appreciate that everybody's on different mornings and evenings and daytimes and time zones. So I really look forward to speaking to you all at the end as well. We're here today to talk a little bit about MUNCH and AI, so the MUNCH Museum's approach to AI. But before we start, we really want to give you a feel of our new museum, which opened in 2022. So we're about a year and a half in and show you a little bit about what we do. And then I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So we'll start with a little video. So that is our new Munch Museum in Oslo, which is dedicated to the artist Edvard Munch. And this is one of the world's largest museums dedicated to a single artist. We have about 27,000 artworks, but actually all the artworks belongs to the citizens of Oslo, and we're only the caretakers. So that's our kind of main role. We have 13 floors, 11 galleries. We've got a concert hall, a cinema, a restaurant, a cafe, a shop. We have workshops and studios for children, and we run a program which actually goes across. Of course, we do contemporary and modern arts exhibitions, but we also have a program dedicated to young people, which includes workshops and festivals. We also employ young people to design the program for young people. And we have a contemporary live program, which crosses performance, music, talks, and so on. So we very much are more than just Edvard Munch, but Edvard Munch, the artist, is really the foundation that we build our program on. And as many museums, we are also offering alternative forms of experiences. So this is the Shadows exhibition at the museum, which demonstrates Edvard Munch's studio. And there's a whole range of interactive experiences in the museum. We also have what we call Munch Lab, which is a prototyping space where we play with new technologies, where we design future museum experiences with and for young people. So we have a particular focus on AI and gamified and immersive experiences, and also a talent program. So this is all important parts of what we are as a museum and how we approach technology. We also have I would say quite a good, well-established digital reach across the world. Last year, we had about 60 million engagement on our social media content, which is across different channels, Instagram, YouTube, obviously our website, and so on. It's really important for us to reach further. We have reached about 78% of Oslo's population with our digital content, and probably around 45% of Norway's population. So the digital side is important to us. And now to the point of the discussion today, why use AI in a museum? And this is something we get asked frequently as we are developing our approaches to AI on different levels. So I wanted to start off, before I give some examples on how we approach AI and what we're actually doing with AI in the museum, I wanted to mention some of the challenges that we're facing that leads us to use technology in different ways, but also how we have a critical approach to what we use. So I want to start off with that. First of all, we have a large collection, as I mentioned in the introduction. We also have a collection database. So our physical collection is artworks, like I said, almost 27,000 artworks that has to be preserved and cared for. And in that, it's essential that we use technology and look at new methods and tools to do so. We also have a collection database, which has about 60 years of manual data entry. So the data quality is in some areas poor, in some areas better. But we do see there's a big potential for using machine learning in these areas. At the same time, though we are a museum and we engage almost 1 million people a year physically at the museum, we still know that 82% of Norway's population has not visited an art museum in the last year. So this is obviously very important for us. We know that our audiences are getting older. It's harder to reach young people, but that doesn't mean young people are not engaging in culture. They are engaging in culture, but they're willing to try different mediums and platforms. Roblox has 70 million daily users, largely young people, which are our future audiences. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we can create experiences that are interactive, immersive, personalized, and often machine learning driven in some way. This is also part of the experience economy. A long time ago, we went away from creating and presenting objects to actually creating experiences for people. So meeting points between the art and people is really what we do. And there, to do that, technology is kind of the framework and foundation that we use this for. At the same time, we now know that we're probably facing one of the biggest technological challenges in our lifetime, AI. So on one side, AI challenges liberty, democracy, equality, but it can also be a way to democratize creativity, but it can also challenge copyright, authenticity, On the other side, it's a great tool for research, for developing new methods, whether that is for research, medical science, or for conservation of artwork. So this is something we think about a lot. And in this, artists and artists' voices are really critical in having that discussion. So that's some of the kind of challenges that we're facing. That leads our approach or forms our approach to AI at Munch. And I want to give you a couple of examples on how we approach it. So in 2022, just after opening, we launched our first triennial called The Machine Is Us. So this is a large-scale exhibition that featured around 25 Norwegian and international artists. At the core of this exhibition was the investigation into what does technology development mean to society. And this really underlines our societal role and our fundamental role as a museum presenting artists. So we don't work with AI. But in terms of artworks, we don't generate artworks, but we work with artists that use AI as a tool, as a thematic, and as a form. So that's one of the pieces I wanted to lift up from the exhibition is by the Ukrainian artist Lesia Vasilchenko called Tycooness. She generated a manual data set of images of sunrises between the border between Russia and Ukraine. And in this video installation, there's like a continuous sunrises or visualization of sunrises that never existed, and many other brilliant artists you can find on our website as well. The next rendition of this triennial is happening in 2025. So this kind of underlines our approach to AI in terms of art. We work with artists that work with AI as a tool, as a form, and as a subject matter. But at the same time, we also know it's important to extend and make Edvard Munch relevant to new audience groups. And we have a new project which we're working on now called New Snow, which is creating a real live drawing experience where you can sit down and draw with a line or a machine learning algorithm trained on Edvard Munch's drawings. And what we're trying to do here is remove the audiences from screens and put them physically with a pen and a piece of paper. And as you start to draw, you draw with a line of Munch. So that's one of the ways that we try to make Edvard Munch's artistry relevant to a new and emerging young audience. At the same time, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have a large collection. We also have a collection management database, which varying data quality. And we're looking into starting up a project now, which is using machine learning to analyze our images or our artworks, analyze a whole range of letters. We have letters, diaries, drawing books, sketchbooks by Edvard Munch, and then use that to create new correlations for research, but also for mediation. And at the same time, we're looking into whether we can create a natural language model based and trained on all of Edvard Munch's data. So that's not very explicit to say we're not trying to recreate Edvard Munch, but we're trying to recreate a language model that can make the art more relevant to our public or the audiences, but also as a source for research. And at the end, we also use this in conservation, and the Perceive project is a project that Irina is going to present in a minute, which is looking into how we can use AI machine learning for digital preservation of color in heritage objects. So we're going to go a bit more into that. And coming to the end of what I want to talk to today, I just wanted to mention I often, almost daily, get asked these two questions. And the first is, it's Munch using AI to create art, and can AI create art? And then answer the first question, we're not using AI to create art. As I said, we work with artists that use AI as a tool and as a thematic, but we're not using it. But we do use it for conservation. We use it for collection management, and we do use it for creating new audience experiences. And to answer the last question, can an AI create art? I think this is a hot topic. It's being discussed everywhere. And I like to refer to Edvard Munch to answer that. He said that all art, literature as music, has to be produced with one's own heart's blood. Art is one's heart's blood. So if you perceive it in Edvard Munch's context and respond in that way, there's something about subjective consciousness, the intention to create. And in today's context of an AI, Edvard Munch would probably say, no, an AI can't create art, but that doesn't mean in the future it will not. And with that, I think I'm going to pass the word over to Irina. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce you the Perceive project, a 3 years project funded by the European Union's Horizon Research and Innovation Program under the grant agreement that you can see a very long number there in the corner. It's a project that started last year, and it's about color change, about artificial intelligence, about collaborative network of experts in different areas working interdisciplinary, about science, about conservation, and how we can predict not only the future, but also a little bit the past. And I am the project leader on behalf of MUNCH for this project, as we are partners, beneficiary. And my presentation will focus only on few aspects because the project is quite big and has many different activities. But I will just briefly introduce the project and the scenarios where we provided case studies from our collection, the WG2 scenario dealing with paintings and colored graphic art on paper. And then I will focus a little bit on the science behind color change and what this means for Perceive and for us as a museum when we speak about the iconic scream that is one of these case studies in this scenario. And of course, some ideas about what are the main challenges of the project and open questions that we hope to be able to answer through the outcomes of the project and some future prospects. So I'm not going to dive a lot in artificial intelligence. This is Brigitte's areas. Mine is mostly science, but I want you to make you curious about why we chose to start with scientific data and scientific interpretation and study of colors, and then go into direction of experiencing it and creating algorithms that can reproduce the color change or simulate it or reconstruct it and so on. So Perceive stands for Perceptive Enhanced Realities of Colored Collections through Artificial Intelligence and Virtual Experiences. And the project aims to propose and to develop a new way that we perceive, preserve, curate, exhibit, understand, and access colored collections. And the activities in the different work packages of the project are organized and developed around 5 key scenarios. 5 key scenarios, each of them providing case studies with a series of already acquired or to be acquired scientific data that is going to be processed further on for achieving the goals and the outcomes of the project. And among these 5 scenarios that you can see here, they have each of them, they're identified with a symbol and a color. I can mention the lost polychromy of classical sculptures, the fading of colors in objects as paintings and graphic art, the fading of colors in textiles, objects or collection, in historical photos, and not for less the digital born art. So different kind of scenarios with different kind of objects made of different kind of materials and that display different kind of color change with their own mechanism of formation. And in this research project, we are a consortium of 11 partners. From Norway, we are 2 partners. One is Munch Museum, as I mentioned, and also NTNU Color Science Lab in Gjøvik. And then there are other research institutes, other 3 museums. We have Victoria and Albert Museum from UK and Art Institute in Chicago. And then from Europe, we still have National Museum of Archaeology in Naples. And also a few companies that are mainly specialized in the virtual reality immersive context. On our website, munch.no, you can actually find information and link to the web page of the project itself if you are curious about. The project has been launched through a kickoff meeting last year in March in Naples. It has been an open event with many presentations from the different responsibles of work packages and the coordinator of the project, Sofia Pescarin. The 11 institutions that form the consortium have been representing 8 countries, as I said, from Europe and overseas, and public, also among the audience of the museum in Naples, could also assist. And we discussed in that occasion also the premises of starting the work together. After that, there was another big event in September in Lecce, also in south of Italy, a graphic heritage workshop where organized by the coordinator and another responsible of work package from Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. And on this occasion, we met again to assess work done and to plan for future work. And it's been interesting to participate at this workshop also because some of the outputs or outcomes of previous projects in which Consiglio Nazionale di Ricerca and other partners engage have been presented. So we could also experiment some of those demonstrators in terms of virtual reality, immersive reality, and so on. So I was speaking about the goals and the outcomes of the project, and there is a certain complexity regarding this project in particular, because there are many outcomes, 16 in total, but and they will be achieved through a website or web-based platform, at least in what concerns the knowledge and the data that we are putting together for all the case studies from these 5 scenarios I was speaking about. And there will be a repository of colored knowledge that will also refer to guidelines and tools for museum and exhibition like designers, together with guidelines for reconstructing colors, for regeneration services, and other kind of services in terms of restoration or colorization of images, analytical visualization services, a new proposal for a light damage estimator that is quite important for conservation field when we predict also the further change in objects that are sensitive to light and so on. All these services and tools, they will answer to specific needs and requirements of main categories of stakeholders like museum professionals or conservators, professionals working with science or curating the exhibitions or with light design, to educators in general, but also to other categories of stakeholders, as it's, for example, creative industries or the larger public. And I could point some, let's call them keywords, that show not only the complexity of the project, but also the way we work in an interdisciplinary way, because we are aimed to study, to design color, the color change itself, but also what is behind the color change, that is the kind of damage, the kind of process, the chemical and physical processes. Then we aim to visualize it, to reconstruct, to simulate, to predict and estimate, keeping always in mind that it's very important that even the color fades or changes or darkens or whatsoever process it happens, the object itself has to be assured that it will last as much as possible. So we have to speak about conservation and preservation guidelines and needs. And in addition to these aspects that regard the whole development of the project and different outcomes, there is always a certain focus on experience, because there are 3 different outcomes that regard prototyping, and this has to do a lot with artificial intelligence, with algorithms and all sorts of processes that can lead us into something that we experience in an immersive or augmented way or virtual way or whatsoever. It's not my specialty, so if I use a term that doesn't correspond, I have to be corrected. But these prototypes speak about caring and authenticity, how the experience itself relates to the authenticity of the object itself, but also in the way we can experience the color in its change, and how we can, through the experience, create more of this sense of care about color, about preserving objects. And then an open museum space prototype that is something where out of the context of a physical space like a museum exhibit, we can demonstrate and create experiences also. And moving to what I was speaking about scenarios, I'm going to speak a little bit of the about the case studies that MUNCH Museum made available for this project. And we speak about scenario 2, the change of colors in painting and works of paper. Here we selected already a few case studies that are interesting from different partners. And as I said, ours is the Scream in 2 versions of it, different materials, different techniques, different supports. Then we have watercolors, Road in Provence by Cézanne, provided by Art Institute in Chicago, and some mural paintings that are housed now at National Museum in Naples, that after the eruption in Vesuvio, they have been retrieved from these archaeological sites, already in a condition where the color changed from yellow to red because of the heat and all the phenomena that happened during the eruption. And if we want to focus only on case studies that we provide as a museum and as a colored collection, as owning a colored collection, I just want to point few aspects regarding the science and how science can bridge all the overall knowledge we have about the colored collection into creating something that is more experiential. And we have to start with the experience itself that Munch had when he got inspiration for this motif. And we are lucky to have writings by him, including this letter where he speaks about how he saw the clouds turning blood red while he was passing by in a park in Oslo, and he suddenly saw all these shades, almost fire, blood in the sky. And what actually this experience, this perception of the colors of the clouds somehow triggered inside him an emotional experience related also with his human emotions. And practically he was able to render through the scream of nature, because these colors, he says that the clouds as actual blood, the color shrieked and then became the scream. This this nature scream became the human nature scream, because he himself identified inside himself emotions as despair, anxiety, that probably was also very much the collective despair, anxiety of those times he was living in. So what he also says that is interesting in terms of how we interpret and how can we take further this representation of the sunset and of the human despair is that I do not paint what I see, but what I saw. And this speaks about the authentic experience, the original intention of the artist, and poses us the question how we can actually make this happen again in every moment that someone will experience something we create in the future using tools of artificial intelligence or algorithm whatsoever. So we never can forget this original testimonial of the artist when we think about how we recreate it again and again and again. And this where Scream becomes probably a time capsule, because it's something that comes from the past. It's more than 100 years since it has been created. And we don't know yet the precise year when this happens. The first hypothesis of dating was 1893, as the other version that now is housed in National Museum in Oslo too. But then there were some polemics, and there are still some polemics, and there was a second dating with question mark 1910. And a long time, this object suffered several, how how to say, disruptive events, among which the theft between 2004 and 2006, that created more change in the appearance itself. And that now poses us many questions about how we can reproduce the original appearance and how we can predict further change. Because we know how the painting looks like now, and during these 3 years of project, we might still be able to assess and monitor and to create tools for this purpose, of course. But then how this will look like in 2125, for example, or even later on. So the screen becomes, from this perspective, a time capsule, because if we relate the archival and historical data we have about the object itself and how it has been made with which intention of the artist, with the scientific data that we got from different campaigns, one of the latest was a MOLAB access, that is another European project scheme for funding, for having access to sophisticated equipment that can analyze precious objects in 2017. So how we blend all this data, and in a way that then we can faithfully and as much as possible authentically can reconstruct these color changes that we notice in the objects. And I will speak a little bit about it after. How we can create systems to be able to regenerate and predict the color change, eventually create a light damage estimator that can apply for this kind of case studies, and then again, prototyping all these concepts of caring authenticity in Open Museum for immersive and exhibition experiences. So many different aspects. Nowadays, if you come to visit us, you can find, if you're lucky, to be at the right time, in the right place, you can find this main version of the screen in the semi-permanent exhibition Infinite in our building in Björvika, which is quite central, near the central station and the fjord. But it's not the only version. And you have to be lucky, because all these 3 versions, there is also a pastel on cardboard and a lithograph on paper, all together in the same space. They are only displayed for 30 minutes up to 1 hour in a day, but by alternating them. So they are not displayed at the same time. The picture you see here is just an example of how they would look like if we would display them at the same time, but this is not actually possible. And the real reason for this is to prevent the cumulative exposure to light. The environment is already very dark because we had to limit to the minimum the light exposure levels. And then the environment is also very carefully monitored, because the humidity, the relative humidity, temperature also levels have to be very well screened, and there are standards, so we cannot go beyond certain values. Regarding previous studies and observations also from my colleagues in conservation, we know that this version of the screen had several color change phenomena in different areas, but let's call them the main 3 are in the shades of the sky, where studies already proved that the cadmium yellow faded partially or completely, in the area of the throat of the main character, and in this area of the cardboard in the left corner below, where actually the damage became more obvious after the theft in 2004, when actually after 2006, when it has been recuperated. And the main materials that we know are fading because they are light sensitive, and they can change color after a while. If these conditions of climate are not properly controlled and monitored, are, as I said, cadmium yellow, vermilion, red lake that you can see on the bridge, and of course the support that is quite sensitive, a cardboard. And speaking about science and visualization, here you see 2 images, but it's the same object, is the screen. And what you see is scientific data in a visual representation. And many of you might not know what is a macro XRF tool or what are elemental mapping. What I can tell you is that what I show you in each image is different composition, two different materials, coloring materials. In this case, I had to use grayscale because it's how the tool, the equipment provides the data. You can color it in false colors, but sometimes this can be tricky because it gives you a different interpretation if you don't know what you are reading in the image. But on if you see the screen on your left, you have the cadmium yellow lines. That means that the element cadmium can be present either in yellow or orange hues of colors, is mapped in that image. And you can see it in the sky, in all those shades. You can see it in the lake, on the bridge, and in the main character figure. And then on the right, with red, you have mercury. Mercury stands for vermilion because it's a mercury sulfide in chemical terms. Doesn't mean that you need to know about it, just know it's a red. And you can see how much red and how much yellow we have. And to a certain extent, you can also imagine that they can overlap if you look to the colored image of the sky, for example, as in the detail here. So what this imaging tool or equipment that is a scientific imaging tool, mapping, gives us is to know how an element that represents one or even more sometimes pigments or coloring materials is distributed on the painting. What this means that we have compositional material information in one image. We can actually overlap the image if we use false color, as I said, but we also have technical data. I mean, how the object has been painted. And it's very simply displayed. It's still scientific, but it's highly accurate. And this is the kind of data that we start to work with when we do data processing and perceive. Then to this, we will add other kind of measurements and data. In this case, for example, we had another campaign in 2019 with the macrophotometer. That is a tool that can help us assess the light fastening of certain colored materials. And then based on this, we can actually create a whole policy for lighting in a museum for a certain collection that is light sensitive. And it was interesting because in this case, we initially thought that the screen is highly, highly sensitive and really one of the priorities in the collection to be preserved. But at the end, we know that is, although there are components in his material structure that are sensitive to light, it belongs to category of blue wool 2, blue wool 3, that is less sensitivity. And you'll understand why I say this after when I go to the screen number 2. But here, I just want you to ask a question. Just looking by these two images, that is the same object in 2 different years. They are digital images, so they're not, let's call them the original, the way it looked like when it was created, but they document a state, a condition of the painting in time. One, it was before the theft, 2003, and then another one in 2008. And I bet you already recognize some differences between colors, and I can tell you why, because the condition in which the digital images have been taken were different for sure. The photographic camera, the illumination condition were different. But beyond this, you still can notice differences and changes in some areas that I already spoke about. Just think about the corner where you have this halo. There was a liquid agent that we don't know the nature that during the theft damaged this angle. And you can see how color also have been damaged. They faded more. And then, of course, we have to go with a microscope to look closer to other details to notice more changes. But you already perceive something. And can be tricky because some of you might also have some issues with the perception of colors, and not all colors are what they seem or the way they seem on the screen. And now I get to another research question that for us as scientists, as I am a scientist, is always important and is not always very easy to answer. When we do material characterization of materials that we know they have certain sensitivity, and in this case, I bring just a paper that has been published in 2020 by Letizia Monico and other collaborators. We try always to correlate the data because we sometimes are lucky enough, as we are in our collection, to have original artist material from the own studio of the artist, in this case, paint tubes, as you can see in the image. And if we study these original artist materials, their aging, their mechanism of degradation and change, we might be able to correlate this with the real paintings. In this case, Letizia was lucky enough to have a flake from this cadmium yellow, the famous coloring agent that fades. But then she had to do additional research in her lab and reproduce several shades of this pigment and age it and color and characterize it chemically to understand what is happening, why this fading happens. And interestingly enough, after all this research that has been also quite sophisticated, like synchrotron radiation techniques and all other sorts of equipment used, the research pointed out that in this specific case, for the screamen, for the cadmium yellow that Munch used, is not only light that is responsible for the color change, but also the relative humidity. So we go back to why actually we have to preserve these objects and keep them in controlled and monitor conditions, because in many cases, the environmental factors, they collaborate in the damage process. Regarding the Scream 2, that's the second version, this is actually the most sensitive among the different versions of the same motif we have in the collection. It's a Blue Wool 1 category. For those working with collection management and conservation, it might be easier to understand. I'm not going into it. This is a print, hand-colored, and the shades that are mostly sensitive are those in red that have been characterized as being vermilion. Again, the same type of coloring material as in the other Scream, but with a different technique. And then we have the paper that usually yellows and other kind of coloring materials. And here again, this time I'm using false color to show you an image that also has compositional data, scientific data, where you can see both the unmixed and mixed pigments, the cadmium yellow with the vermilion. This is how we use color to not only to perceive the change, but to try to explore more what is the extension of the change, how the technique of wet marble influence probably the process of aging and change in time. So there are many challenges. I know I'm getting quite late, but I will only point 3 regarding the Perceive itself as a project, is that we will aim to create this concept in which authentic artwork image and eventually the reconstruction or simulation of it and the science behind the study of color change can be displayed, perceived, preserved, curated, and accessed. And it's not an easy one. And then, as you said, as you saw, the change in color has multiple forms, multiple mechanisms, and requires an interdisciplinary approach. But then the question is how the artificial intelligence can showcase visually this complex approach, and how can we make it simple, visual for a wider audience, and then how we use the scientific data, because we want to be accurate as scientists. But in an experience, we also have to have a human experience that might not be so accurate all the time. It cannot measure it in a scientific parameter. How we can create this experience also embodied and to motivate, to engage the public, and to gain awareness about the fragility of the objects. And there are many questions that come from the scientific field and from the research. And some of them I already pointed them through the slides I presented before. I will just speak about one just to finish, is that how many stories can we create or are we allowed to create around the fading and darkening? How many hypotheses of reconstruction, simulation, and rejuvenation of this color change? what are the criteria and variables that we have to think about. And this is just an idea about how we also work collaboratively. This was an ideation workshop about the caring prototype that we made in December last year under the coordination of the Sofia Pescarin and a PhD student of her. And that led us to a winning idea with about a possible prototype and its storyboard, how we can use the scream as a kind of time machine, and how this experience that we address to a very focused target group, teenagers, and that can happen in our audience lab, as Birgitte presented, how this experience can actually not only deepen the connection with the artwork and the knowledge we have on it about the color change itself, but also create and enhance this sense of wonder, curiosity, and personal relevance. So a lot of questions still to be answered. And as future activities and prospects, I invite you to Oslo in June for those who want to come to the conference on innovation in art, research, and technology, as we are going to deliver a very interesting workshop before and during the conference. And hopefully there will be, at the end of the project, towards the end of 2025, a final hybrid exhibition in different locations. And MUNCH, through its audience lab, will be one of these occasions. And we are still starting now discussing about what this kind of hybrid exhibition contents might be. But for us, of course, it will be about the Scream experience. Maybe we will Scream all together or individually, we will see. We already have some keywords from a brainstorming session, but there is much work to do until we define everything. So maybe in 1 year or two, you will be able to know more about how we actually use the artificial intelligence approach to deliver this experience, and you can visit us at MOOC. And I thank you and sorry for taking so long. I hope it was not too boring, my scientific approach, and I welcome further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Irina.
Thank you. Not at all boring. Thank you so much, Irina and Birgitte. I really appreciate your time today and sharing your incredible work. So why don't we go ahead and take some questions from the audience. While we wait for folks to type in their questions, we did have some people who registered who submitted questions ahead of time. I'll go ahead and read a couple of those. So one in particular, this is more specific to collections management and AI use. One person was asking, do you use AI in cataloging, generating any related metadata, or preparing a IIIF manifest?
We're actually just starting a project with a Beneric AI startup in Oslo, looking at how we can generate both improved data quality, but also create new metadata through running visual data analysis on the artworks, but also running analysis on all the digitized correspondence, letters, diaries, sketchbooks that we have from MUNCH. So it's a project we haven't done yet, but we're about to start. We're waiting for funding, and we hope we're going to be successful to start up. But it's absolutely something we're looking at, and is desperately needed, I think, across the sector, and you can see it in the same in other collections on data management collections across the sector.
Certainly. One question that we do get a lot, in particular around the AI webinar series, is around policy and guidance development. Does your organization have any guiding principles or guidelines or policies around AI use that you have willing to share, or just kind of talk a little bit about?
We could say so as the Munch Museum, we're actually part of the Oslo Municipal, which have guidelines, and also developing new guidelines in terms of AI and AI use. And also we're waiting for EU's constitution and ethical guidelines that are now being delayed again, of course, which we follow. But also we have, as an institution, we also are very careful about the ethics, what tools we use, what data set we use, and also what kind of conversations we have about AI is also really important to us. And I mean, in specifics, in terms of the Perceive project, there hasn't been guidelines developed yet, but there's a discussion around what guidelines we use and what tools we develop and what data source we use for those tools.
Okay, great. We did get a question in the Q&A. Can you discuss the use of AI in interpretation? For example, an AI created information panel, or how the museum visitors interact with AI AI content, either directly or indirectly.
But when it comes to, and Irina, jump in, but when it comes to creating experiences or audience experiences, like for example, NewsNow, where we are training a machine learning algorithm with MUNCH drawings to create a drawing experience. So there's a couple of things about that. So we will not create Edvard Munch AI and pretend it's Edvard Munch. That's really important for us if we want to. And when we use machine learning to create kind of mediation experiences, we will inform very clearly about the technology, the experience, the data, and the source gone into doing that. So yeah, and we were, as I said in the beginning, we do not create AI art as such, but we do work with artists. That's our mandate and that's our purpose.
Right. Devon, any questions from you?
No, I'm just taking everything in. The discussion about the Scream was really incredible. I love the art history concept of it. So that was really interesting to hear all about. There was another question in the chat that I want to make sure we don't miss.
Oh, good catch. Thank you.
It's from Olivia. They said, do you think that we will get to the point where curators are using AI regularly as a tool for curation, or does the Munch Museum plan on using AI for curation?
Interesting. I mean, you wanna have a go?
Well, it's a tricky one, but I think that if we provide a tool that can enhance the visualization and also at the same time have this estimate or prediction of how the object could change further, then maybe curators will be influenced to use it, because it will become easier to understand also what is the selection of object that is most convenient, or how a certain object can be displayed to have both this, as I spoke about, fragility of collections, both aspects, that the material one and the symbolic, the image itself. Because I know that there is a very general trend, if I'm not wrong, that art historians tend to see the image and the concept behind in a more like theoretical aspect, while, for example, a scientist or a conservator will always have a very material focused approach. And if AI can help to bring these approaches together and not to appear like they are contradicting sometimes, especially for curating purpose, when you have to be aware of the materiality too, in terms of preservation and all these guidelines for exposure and so on, then probably the task of curators will become much simpler, especially in the case of this complex situation of objects that cannot stay on display 24 hours in 24 hours.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, I think just to like sum up in terms of the curatorial practice as art practice, at least today we still see it as citing Edvard Munch Day requires subjective consciousness, a practice, and intentionality. But definitely, like AI can become a tool for curators, like Irina said, to better understand and care for the collection that they want to exhibit. But I would say that for us, very much the curatorial practice and arts practice requires a living or previously living artist or curator to conduct and create that. So absolutely, I think humans are definitely still in the loop.
Thank you for that. We got one more question in the Q&A. Between the two images, seeing how much Scream has degraded over time, how much interval is suggested to take the pictures? Like, for instance, over the period of 100 years, if an image has degraded, it is found 20 years back, suppose. So how much interval is necessary, like every years, or first when found and today? I guess the way I'm interpreting this question is, how frequently are you taking photographs of the painting?
Oh, well, I wouldn't know, but for the Scream, we have been lucky to have some pictures in some catalogs, but they were like in 1930s, which quite a small time span after it was been created, but they are black and white. And for us, it's a documentation is important, but in terms of colors, doesn't give so much. But luckily, there are ways through color science, algorithm, and processes to make reference, like a colorimetric reference. And we actually achieved already one. We need to refine it in the project, in one of the tasks of the project, because that could say more or less how we think, is a supposition in any case, that the object looked like originally. Now, in terms of documenting the state, the condition a long time, this can be made a regular practice, but it depends on the availability of the documentation tools, in this case, photography or video documentation. So I think it depends a lot if the collection is an institution that can afford to have a photography lab and document this periodically, or you just do it on specific occasion for specific projects. For example, the TEF, that was a disruptive event, has created possibilities for a lot of study and documentation on the Scream. So the misfortune turned into good fortune for us, because then we had a lot of data and scientific data from it in terms of also of images. Then we had other campaigns as MOLAB I was speaking about in 2017. Nowadays, from the museum praxis and being also part of conservation, and I see the work of my colleagues in conservation, I think that the practice itself or the guidelines are that every time the object is on loan or put in or out in exhibition, it needs to be documented and photographed. And there is a condition check and report that every responsible for that project has to do. So I think it's variable, but if it's a private context for this object that wants to be documented, then this is up to the owner or the one who is interested in documenting it. If it's an institution, then there should be guidelines that point on how often you do this documentation.
I think it's worth just adding. So we have, like we said, 27,000 artworks, which pretty much all we're just doing the last bit of the graphical MUNCH graphic collections. It has been digitized, but it's a huge resource requirement to do so. But we are saying that we have a section and a conservation lab, which are continuously conserving paintings, taking them out, documenting them, and like Irina said, when it goes out on loan. But it isn't our policy in terms of resources we haven't got the capacity to regularly document yearly each artwork, but it's definitely an ongoing documentation of the conservation aspects, and then paintings will be taken out and conserved as and when.
Thank you. So that's it for the Q&A questions. I had one more question for you, Irina, in particular around the color knowledge repository. Will that be publicly accessible or available to other cultural institutions who might be interested in learning from your work?
This is still under discussion among the members of the consortium. The idea is that if it's a web-based platform, we can grant different types of access according also the type of stakeholder. Because of course there is one type of access if it's let's say common citizen, and then if it's a professional that has a very specific interest in getting access to specific data, then we might put some restricted access and or access just by request or things like that. But this has not been yet defined 100%, so I wouldn't know at this point. Later on, I might have an answer.
Well, maybe we can have you back on the webinar series again and when you're further along in the project, because I'd love to have you guys back. This was so great. Unfortunately, we are about out of time. Thank you again, both Irina and Birgitte, for your time today and sharing the projects that you're working on. Thank you, everyone, for joining and listening in today and sharing or asking questions. We will be back in March with another open discussion on AI use in cultural heritage. We're working on a spreadsheet of AI resources for people to use as they're working on developing guidelines and policies for use of AI tools. Follow us on social media. in order to stay current on BPOC's webinar series and what we're up to. Don't forget to take time to complete the survey if you haven't done so already. We hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we will see you next time. Thanks again, everyone. Take
Thank you
care.
very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.